But one of the extraordinary things about their stories is that they were also doing things that, while in a Western sense we'd look at it as normal civic voluntarism, were potentially dangerous. They were putting themselves in conflict or out of sync with local authorities from time to time. That's one of the great dramatic threads in the story. I'm not going to spoil the story uh, entirely by recounting some of the climactic scenes, but there is a dramatic arc there that I want your editors to talk about a little later. My question is really a reporter's question. We all know how difficult it is often to get people to go on the record, to get people to go on tape, to talk about what they're doing. How difficult was it in this case, and were there other civic activists you would have liked to have profiled who said, no, thank you, I'm not interested?
So I guess part of this is the beauty of radio, in which you're not showing their face. It's very intimate. You can get to know somebody, but you don't have to have them pictured, which gives them a certain anonymity if they need it. But apart from that, Iraq, as you know, is this fantastic place, like many places in the Middle East, where if you go down a street and knock on doors, pretty much every door they're going to talk to you. And in most places, if they have tea, they will invite you in for tea. I mean, imagine that happening in the West, for instance. It's just not going to. But there, people wanted to talk, and after Saddam they were used to talking, and they still have things they want to get off their chest. And but I think also there's an incredible generosity among people, that generosity of being willing to share the most painful things to a reporter.
For those who have listened to the piece, and you sort of fall in love with the characters as you listen to it, I have to say, because they are remarkable people. Have you been back to Mosul since, and have you checked back in with the subjects of the piece?
I have. I was in Mosul about 2 weeks ago, and the city, the old city, the historic old city that was pretty much destroyed, that we reported from, that the volunteers were trying to clean up and make safe again, looks a lot better. There's electricity in most places. There's running water. There's even a lovely little cafe that's opened in the old city. It's suffering, of course, from the pandemic, but due partly to these volunteers and kind of the cascading effect that they had, it does look better. Safwan al-Madani, who created this organization and leads teams of volunteers, and whose motivation originally was he wanted to make sure that there wasn't corruption, that money that was being given to help people actually went to people. Um, Actually joined the International Organization for Migration, a UN agency which helps resettle people, but he is still very much in charge of this organization, and they are helping people rebuild their shops. They are helping with the coronavirus because the hospitals are in really bad shape. So they're providing supplies, medical supplies, all sorts of things. Sarur, the nurse who was picking up bodies and diffusing suicide belts, is still a nurse, but she also still runs volunteers, and they actually volunteer in the COVID ward of the hospital. So it's kind of in their core. I think it's part of their DNA, these young people in particular. This is what they do. They help people, they volunteer, they make things better.
And another of the threads, finally, before I turn to your editors and producers, another of the threads in the piece is the love these people have for their cities. So let me ask about Mosul. Is Mosul back?
Hmm. Mosul, Mosul is very much an idea as well as a reality. And by that, I mean people who love Mosul in the same way people love Baghdad or people love New York City. Part of what they love about it is the shared history or their own personal history, the stories their parents told them, the covered market they used to go to when they were children. That part will always be there, and it will always be deeply important to the people from Mosul. It has a more promising future, but a lot of it, of course, because it's an Iraqi city, depends on what happens in the rest of Iraq. But there are parts of it that will never be restored. Um, Archaeological sites, monuments, and of course the biggest loss is the families. Entire families were killed. Thousands of civilians were killed.